Alright, let's talk about problem 21-18 from chapter 21 of your textbook. It says this: suppose that you're trying to decide whether to spend $5,000 on stock issued by Wild Web or on a bond issued by the same company. There's a 60% chance that the value of the stock will rise to $11,000 at the end of the year, and a 40% chance that the stock will be worthless at the end of the year. The bond promises an interest rate of 30% per year, and it is certain that the bond and interest will be repaid at the end of the year. So the question is, assuming that your time horizon is exactly 1 year, will you choose the stock or the bond? So, the way we go about figuring this out is we want to know what is our expected yield, or what is the expected amount of money that we'll have in our pocket at the end of this year. And anytime we say in the mathy kind of world that we're looking at an expected value, what we really mean is that mathematically what we're going to do is we're going to take the percent, and I'm just going to use this little notepad over here to make these notes. So we'll take the percent likelihood and we'll multiply that by the amount that we're likely to get. And as we go through this, you'll see better what I mean by that. But that's our general format for how to find an expected value. So in this case, we'll want to know the expected value of the stock as well as the expected value of the bond, so that we can decide which has a higher expected value at the end of the year. Whichever one we expect will give us more money at the end of the year, of course, that's the one we're going to pick. So that's what we want to find, is what is our expected value, what is the expected amount of money we'll have in our pockets at the end of the year from each, the stock and the bond. So let's start with the stock. So the stock, it tells us there's a 60% chance that the value of stock will rise to $11,000 at the end of the year. So looking at my little formula for expected value, I'll take the percent likelihood, which we're told that percent is 60% chance, right? So 60%, I'm going to put it in decimal form. You always want to put these in decimal form before you do this math. So I'll put 0.60, that's the decimal form of 60%, times what is the amount or the value that we expect with that likelihood. So we're 60% chance that our value will rise to 11,000. So I want to do 60% times 11,000. Alright, so hopefully that helps this expected value formula up here that I wrote make more sense. So I want the percent likelihood, so we're 60% likely to have an amount of 11,000. So the percent likelihood times the amount. That's all we're doing here. And then we're also, at the end of the year, we have a 40% chance that the stock will be worthless at the end of the year. So we need to add to this because we have the word and generally means plus or add. So we have a 60% chance of $11,000 plus a 40% chance, so 0.40, of worthless, so of 0 at the end of the year. And then just to be thorough here, remember that at the end of the year, the amount of money we have in our pocket also will subtract out the amount we paid in at the beginning of the year, right? So we spent $5,000, so we have to subtract that back out because that's $5,000 that we don't have in our pocket at the end of this year. So this is the expected value that we'll earn. We have a 60% chance of ending up with 11,000 plus a 40% chance of ending up with 0, and then minus the amount that we put into it, the amount that we already spent on the stock. And I'll pull up my calculator here and figure out what this amount is. So it's 0.6 times 11,000, oops, 11,000, plus 0.4 times 0 is, of course, 0, so minus 5,000. So our expected value of our stock at the end of the year is 1,600. 1,600. Alright, so now we have to do the same thing for the bond. So for the bond, we're told that we're certain to earn 30% per year in interest on the amount that we put into the bond. So at the end of this year, we'll have our $5,000 plus 30% of that $5,000 in our pocket. So we'll have 5,000 plus 0.30 times 5,000. Does that make sense? So we know at the end of the year we'll get back our original 5,000 and we'll add to it 30% of that 5,000. But then to be thorough, just like above where we subtracted back out the amount that we put in the beginning, I'm going to subtract out the amount that we put in the beginning. So we put in this is just so that we find out how much we earn at the end of the year. Not necessarily how much is in our pocket, but how much more is in our pocket than we started with. So remember that we put in $5,000. So I'm going to subtract that. That's how much I took out of my pocket. And then what I get back at the end of the year is my $5,000 plus 30% of that $5,000. So this whole the whole formula here gives us how much we get back at the end of the year minus how much we put in at the beginning of the year. So it looks a little funny because we add that 5,000 and then subtract the 5,000, but hopefully that makes sense, that the subtracted amount is the amount that came out of our pocket at the beginning. The added amount is just how much we get back into our pocket at the end. Okay, so I'll pull up my calculator again, clear this out, and see how much we get from the bond. So we get our 5,000 plus our 0.3 times 5,000. That's 6,500 minus our 5,000. So here I have 1,500 is my expected value from the bond at the end of the year. That's how much money I will have earned from the bond at the end of the year. So looking at this, we can see that from the stock we expect to get 1,600 and from the bond we expect to get 1,500. So clearly, which one will we choose? We'll choose the one with the more that we expect to make more from, which is the stock. So I'll tell it I choose the stock. Nice. The next question is, how much is our expected end-of-year wealth reduced if we make the wrong choice? So going back to our little spreadsheet over here, our little notepad, the question is, how much less do we make if we go with the wrong choice? So see, if we go with stock, we get $1,600. If we go with the bond, we get $1,500 expected at the end of the year. So our amount that's reduced if we chose the wrong choice, so if we chose the bond, we reduce our expected value by $100. See that? Because our expected value for the stock is $100 more than our expected value for the bond. So here I'm going to say that our expected end-of-year wealth is reduced by $100 if we make the wrong choice. Alright, and the last question it asks us is that suppose the odds of success improve for WildWeb. Now there's a 70% chance that the value of the stock will be $11,000 at the end of the year, and only a 30% chance that it'll be worthless. Now what should we choose, the stock or the bond? So now we have to calculate the expected value of our stock in this second scenario, so stock 2 I'll call it. And we do the same thing. So now we've got a 70% chance, 0.70 times that our value is $11,000 at the end of the year. And an only 30% chance that it's worthless, so our value is 0. And then of course we subtract back out the amount that we put in at the beginning of the year, our 5,000. And let's pull up our calculator and see what this expected value is. So now we've got 0.7 times 11,000. And of course that second part is 0. So I'm just going to take that and subtract my 5,000. And now I've got 2,700 is my expected payoff. So the question asks us should we now choose the stock or the bond? Of course, we'll still choose the stock because the stock's expected value is $2,700, where the bond's expected value is only $1,500. So the stock's expected value actually went up. So of course we're still going to choose the stock. All right, and that's that. So if you have any more questions on this, feel free to come into my office hours and ask, or shoot me an email.